Good morning, Commissioner Bookland. Can you hear us?
Good morning. Yes, I can.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Swanson.
Good morning, Janelle.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Janelle. How are you?
Well, that was Amanda, but I'm sure Janelle is doing fine, as am I.
I'm sorry, Amanda. I wasn't paying attention to which little square was lit up. I just saw Janelle at the top of my screen.
Not a problem.
Just realized I'm going to need to plug in my laptop because I'm running out of battery here. So
Good morning, Commissioner Wilson.
Good morning. Here I am, trying to figure this out. I'm in my office, Janelle.
Good morning, Marty. Can we check that your microphone is working as well, since you will be giving a brief presentation?
Good morning, everyone.
Great,
How's the audio
thank you.
coming through? Awesome.
Perfect.
Good morning, Commissioner Murphy. Commissioner Murphy, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Commissioner Foster.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well.
Great. Thank you.
Janelle, am I seeing everybody except for Sarah and Ezra?
I was just about to check that. One moment. That is correct, Commissioner Havel.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's 8 o'clock. We'll begin the meeting. Sarah and Ezra so far are not available, but hopefully they will join in soon. So welcome to all our guests. I'm not sure who we have, but I think they sign in, correct? And let's see here. Janelle, you want to go through the virtual meeting guidance?
Certainly. Good morning. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public, and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a couple decorum rules. This is a new platform for us today. We are trying Zoom out, so please have a moment of patience if we are transitioning presentations this morning. And we're working with a little bit of a new technology, even though we've been virtual for months. So the couple of decorum rules this morning is number one, please ensure your microphone is muted unless you are speaking. Number two, please state your name before speaking. And if you are a member of the public, please also state the entity that you are with. And three, commissioners, today we are open to trying something slightly new. So if you opt, you may use the hand raise feature and we will help prompt Commissioner Havel if there is a question in waiting. So with that, let's have a fantastic meeting and welcome everyone.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Let's see here. That takes us, any announcements, Michael?
President Hubble, I do not have any announcements this morning.
Okay. And then we have a staff introduction, Ben Erdman.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Hubble. I'll do Ben's introduction this morning. So we're really thrilled to have Ben Erdman on board. He's going to be our new resource recovery manager. And he started around 9 days ago, and he's already been hitting the ground running, lining up and permitting fields and making sure we're all ready to go for our fall harvest. And just a quick note, we're not losing Kim Meyer, even though she's no longer our resource recovery manager. She has been transitioning and hired as our new watershed programs coordinator that we talked about earlier this year. So most recently, Ben was a farm manager for HM Claus, and he led initiatives including nutrient management, pest management, crop rotation, personnel facilities, trucking, all kinds of stuff. And he's really into looking at nutrient issues, soil issues, erosion issues, and looking at intensive agricultural practices that come along with farming. So he really has a passion for farming, a passion for food, and a passion for producing it in ways that are economically sensible as well as environmentally sustainable. And he has a broad range of experience. He actually started out his career in IT, but then moved to the plant and farming field where he has degrees in plant breeding and pathology and has experience in managing full-scale farming operations. So I just want to mention one of the cool things that Ben did as part of his innovative research. He actually developed a large-scale insect rearing program to eliminate the need for chemical spraying. So that was pretty cool. And he also led some modifications and standardization of field equipment to increase efficiency and safety. And so these experiences and this innovative mindset is really going to be exciting for us to tap into as we look for new and innovative ways to apply our nutrients, implement our biosolids management plan after it's completed, and work with our regional water quality goals and complement our Yahara Winds activities. So outside of farming, Ben loves bicycles, motorcycles, anything with two wheels. So he's also into other hobbies that are, of course, interested in food. He always jokes that he works on a farm or works in farming settings, but then he goes home and to relax, he works in his own farm in his backyard. So he really is in the gardening, life sciences, food production, cooking, and things like that. So if you see Ben around, please welcome him. He's a quite tall man, so you probably won't be able to miss him. His office will be across the street in the vehicle loading building, but he'll be around, and I'm sure you'll all be able to meet him virtually at a commission meeting upcoming as we typically do our Metrogro summary at the end of the year. So thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. So he's not online today then, I take it.
He is not online
Okay,
today,
so I can't
unfortunately.
welcome him.
Working hard.
Okay, well, thank you. Do we have any appearances by the public? I don't hear or see anybody. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have the minutes of the last meeting in August, the 27th. Cash statement operating, cash statement capital projects, and then, excuse me, we have one sewer extension approval, and that's for Pioneer Point, city of Madison, but actually in the town of Middleton. So do we have any questions before we get a motion? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
It's Wilson. I'll move approval of the consent calendar as presented.
And do we have a second?
This is Sarah. I'll second.
Commissioner Havel,
Yes?
I did see a hand raised by Commissioner Murphy.
Oh, okay, I only got 4 people that show up and I have to scroll through. So who was the second?
Sarah.
Sarah, okay, I
Sarah,
thought so.
sorry.
Okay, so we got a motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Eskridge. Oh, there we go. To approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
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 Abstain,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark.
Commissioner Clark abstained. Okay, so we have everybody else saying aye, so the motion carries. Okay, that will take us to the presentation of the proposed 2021 operating capital projects and debt service budgets. Michael, you're going to lead this off?
I am. And here we go. I'm going to share my screen. We'll see how this works.
Michael,
And-
just before you get started, Commissioner Wilson, did you raise your hand for the last item, or did you have something you wanted to discuss?
No, yeah, kind of the last item for Tom. If you you were looking for people raising their hand, and Brad still has his hand up. If you click on the participants at the bottom, they should show up on the right-hand side of your screen. And then you can see, so if you go to the bottom and hit participants, and they show up on the right-hand side of your screen. And then you see my hand.
Yes, I see your hand now. It's right next to the microphone being on. Got
Good.
it.
Now check this out. I'm going to lower my hand.
Yep. Okay,
There
thank you,
go.
Tom.
Sorry, I thought I'd help you out there.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so Michael, Brad, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No.
Okay, Michael, take it.
Okay, thank you. Usually I'm just anxious about presenting. Now I'm anxious about seeing if I can use a technology in front of 9 commissioners. Okay. All right. We're making some progress here. Oops. Sorry. Welcome, commissioners and members of the public. As my presentation is loading up here, I'm here to present the 2021 operating budget and capital improvements plan. And our process, I'll share at the end what the next steps in the process are, but today is for me to share the budget, give you a budget overview, and the detailed budget will be available this afternoon on our website, so you can read it in its entirety, maybe prepare for the next steps in the process. I also want to welcome members of our customer communities. Some of them are also in attendance today, and I really appreciate you plugging in to our budget today. I also want to thank our budget team, Dana and Sippy. This is their first of Jeff Brockdrup to support our efforts. This is our, we have a new team putting the budget together, and it's been a real seamless process so far. We started this year in January of 2020 in a bit of a hole, as you recall. Here we commission approves a budget in fall, and then January hits, and we're in a bit of a crisis scenario with our biosolids program because of our wet weather conditions. And we had to amend our budget in January. You amended the budget, giving the district increased spending authority to potentially have to landfill biosolids. And then after that, and two months later, COVID hits, and that has an impact on our revenues. And I thought I'd start this presentation. It would be difficult to talk about 2021 unless we first start about how are we doing this year, and how are we building on what's happening this year with those two challenges to position ourselves for next year. I'm really pleased to say that because of the efforts of department directors, that we project that our 2020 expenditures are going to be down by $1.6 million by the end of the year. Usually we track just from a normal year, our expenditures are down somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000 a year. But this year we expect to have more money than expected, given what's happening with COVID. Revenues are about $1.9 million in less revenue for the end of the year. So we, on balance, we're coming out pretty close to budget. Our reserves are healthy. We have 195 days of reserve, which is $14.5 million. And we have a required minimum reserve of 180 days. So we have reserve capacity as we move in to this next year. We received a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. We received it for our 2020 budget. We just received word this last week, and it's a performance standard for us, where there is 30 criteria that are used to determine if you're presenting your budget in a clear and concise manner, and that you're linking the policy and organizational goals with your funding. And we've put a lot of time into preparing a budget to meet that standard, and we're one of the few utilities in the state that receive this budget presentation award every year. So it's one of our performance standards. I'd like to start with the pointy end of our strategic plan, and that is where we're headed and where we're going. You know, we're authorized by state law to protect public health and the environment. That is why we exist. That is our mission. And with that, we also reach to do more and to enrich life and make the lives of this community better through clean water and resource recovery. So that's our long-term vision. The Commission, through your strategic planning, also has established some ideals. And ideals are extremely important to us because it creates an overview of how we should be conducting business every day, both in the day-to-day work and in our strategic planning work. And equitable, reliable, and cooperative are the things that you've identified, are things we have to look at. The equity, of course, is how do we deliver clean and safe water in an affordable and equitable manner, and looking at equity at both the micro and macro levels. And that is not only the ability to pay for a household, but also looking at the cost of service, and our services fairly priced to recover the cost so we can continue to meet our mission. The part of reliability is that the Commission, when you did your strategic planning in 2018 after the storm events and the flooding, you realized that, you know, that we see a future filled with change, and that our reliability needs to remain constant in those times. And so we have to look at all of our systems and make sure that they're reliable to address climate change, extreme weather, and that we diversify our funding sources in terms of cash versus debt and other factors. So you looked at resiliency as a key piece of what we're doing. And then, of course, being cooperative and being nimble and responsive and bringing others to the table to work with us, because we don't have all the answers ourselves, and to have broader conversations about One Water. And then as you look at the 5 pillars, those are really staff's, the executive team's effort to say, how do we deliver on these promises of our mission, vision, these 5 pillars that are part of our strategic plan? Here are the pillars themselves, and you can see if you squint, there's a lot of projects on our plate. There are a lot of things we're working on, and there are a lot of areas that you'll be dealing with in the coming year where we need your policy direction on how we continue to move forward. And those priorities in 2021, most of these should look very familiar to you because they were many of these, except for one, were our priorities in 2020. Equity, of course, is with everything that's been happening with racial tensions over the last couple of months with George Floyd and other incidents in our own home state here. It really brings to light things that were identified in the Race to Equity report way back in 2013, when it was a bit of a wake-up call for Madison, who thought of itself as a progressive, welcoming, open city of some of the racial challenges we have. And so equity, of course, for us is also very important, and is that we're committed to work on being part of the solution. And this will require more than emails and statements of that we're against racism or we're for equality. It requires us to change. It requires us to listen and build empathy for those who are different for us. And the district is committed to doing this hard work. I know the commission is as well, because equity is part of your ideals, one of your ideals. And we're working to examine our own behaviors and organizational practices to reduce bias and inequities. And that is where our Inclusion and Diversity Committee will be looking at our internal policies, both in our handbook and our inclusive spaces and other things over this next year to address that. Phosphorus management, we have a sigh of relief almost with Yahara winds and how well things are going to reduce phosphorus and achieve permit compliance for phosphorus in Yahara watershed. But we have another watershed that we discharge, Badger Mill Creek, and we'll have some very significant decisions to make. You will, as a commission, on how we achieve our compliance for phosphorus management in Badger Mill Creek. Our customer communities have told us that inflow and infiltration in extreme weather is a major challenge. It showed us in 28 with the August 2018 storm event that how vulnerable we can be. And so our ability to address I&I and having adequate capacity in the collection system will be something the commission will be reviewing and looking at through an update to the collection system facility plan in 2021, and the work that's ongoing with a technical subgroup of our communities on how we're going to tackle inflow and infiltration. Capital investment that also involves reliability and dealing with peak flow at the plant. And we're going to be making some of the most significant capital investments over the next couple of years in infrastructure to deal with capacity and replacing old systems at the treatment plant. Energy management as well. The energy master planning work is ongoing, and the commission will be seeing what type of investments we need to have clean and sustainable energy for the long term. And something new in our strategic plan is building organizational capacity. And those are fancy words, but really what we're talking about is how do we build a leadership culture to be an adaptive culture, to be able to deal with the future, and how do we inspire future leaders here at the district to lead change and the adaptation that we're confronted with all of these factors that are happening around us. And all 6 of these things are built into our budget for this next year. Our total expenditures for 2021 are $45.5 million. which is a 2.6. It's a little deceiving, the 2.8%. That's off the revised budget amount. You gave us increased budget authority for 2020. And as you recall, what we decided to do is instead of increasing service charges to our communities, we stated we are going to use reserve money to make up the difference. And so that's why expenditures look like they're only up 3%. But more realistically, our actual expenditures are up about 5.2%, which is what will be what we will need to recover through service charges in 2021. If you translate that to what it means for an average household, that is about $236 a year and about $2 more a month for our services here at the district was collection and treatment. But if you add the sanitary sewer collection services that our communities also have to charge in their utility bills, the average a typical Madison household pays about $360 a year for wastewater collection and treatment. And that's from the point of flushing your toilet to us discharging to the Badger Mill Creek and Badfish Creek. And you can see regionally, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies does a survey every year of how that is tracking with other regions of the country and how affordable our services are. And another way of looking at that same data is looking at how our service charges have tracked over time, and that the slope is going up at about the same rate as the national average, but we're still behind the national average by about $200 a year. Our operating expenditures fall into these categories. We spend almost $14 million a year for wastewater treatment. We spend $16.5 million for debt for capital projects. And then you'll see the transfers to capital projects fund of $1,486,000. That is an important number for us because that is the cash we are using to fund capital projects. And when I was presenting to you last year at this time, that number was $900,000. So the efforts of the commission and through our planning to be less reliant on debt service and more reliant on cash is showing up in this pie chart significantly for the 2021 budget. And Bill Walker shared as part of the CIP our reasoning for that and our longer term strategy earlier in the year. Here are the summary of the expenditure increases for this year of what amounts to $2 million in additional spending. Significant amounts are ramping up our capital program with debt service and the contribution to the capital projects fund for cash financing are our two most significant increases in this budget. Personnel are going up slightly, and that includes a 2% market adjustment or wage and salary increase for all employees, and the addition of one staff member in human resources, a generalist, to allow us to support our leadership development efforts. Ongoing costs for energy and chemicals, we anticipate to go up slightly. They always do. PFAS testing, this is going to be one of those emerging expenditures for us. PFAS is going to be part of our future for a long time. And we have a plan that we've shared with the commission for us looking at our fate and transport study, and we expect that we'll be doing more testing work in 2021 and based on where the regulatory requirements come down, this will continue to raise in the future. Also, bacterial disinfection risk study as part of our new WPDES permit, and looking in off-season times, we've built money into this budget to do some study efforts, and all other increases are $58,000. So you can see what a fine job the departments have done to keep what I continue to call a flat budget, and continue to keep our service charges as low as possible, recognizing the impacts our communities are seeing with their impacts on COVID and trying to aid in the recovery. Most of our revenues, of course, come from sewer service charges. We do receive some septage hauling charges. Pumping stations are just a cost. We service Madison pumping stations, and that's the revenue we receive, but there's also a cost to us because it takes our staff to maintain their lift stations and pumping stations. And then all the other revenues are things like struvite, our interest, income, and other things. Struvite sales we're projecting to be lower. We're seeing an interesting trend that we're seeing less phosphorus in our influent. And so our production, we're seeing a gradual reduction in our production levels for struvite because there's less phosphorus actually in the influent, which is a very good thing. We're also expecting connection charges to be down and slightly because we don't know how development activity will respond in the future. I did mention earlier our capital improvements plan, and we have a really big couple of years coming up here. The last time we've seen the level of project load and spending was way back in 2014 when we did the 11th edition. We built the pumping station 18 in Force Main to create additional redundancy and built the maintenance facility, so that 2014, 2015, and 2016 were big capital years for us, big construction, design and construction years. And you can see our collection system facilities work and work in the collection system to build new interceptors and increase capacity to serve our developing communities is really ramping up in the years to come. And that dash line is showing what when I came to you last year where I thought we would be in 2020, and we're getting a little bit of a slower start on some of the construction activities, and that some of those dollars have shifted into 2021. So that's what you see that dash showing. The projects themselves, many of these contracts you have already awarded for clean water fund projects. Our low interest loan projects are in the neighborhood of $32 million a year. Include a variety of interceptor projects, peak capacity improvements here at the treatment plant, and also replacing aging systems here at the treatment plant, like a UV disinfection system. Projects we're funding with cash are $7.2 million, and you can see these are smaller projects. We're drawing a line somewhere between $3-4 million on what we try to fund with cash versus longer term debt. And these are the projects that we'll be spending money on in 2021. And those are in the budget you'll be receiving. We have detailed descriptions of all of these projects for you. The debt service fund, I wanted to show you this, and this is in our capital plan, but what it shows that for the long haul, we're going to be continuing to invest in capital, and even though we'll be funding mode of having to replace critical infrastructure, and that trend line is fairly consistent of about 3% a year that we can expect, that will be increasing funding of capital and debt financing capital for the foreseeable future. So overall, as the summary, that we reduced our spending on critical operational needs in 2020, and we will be in 2021 to minimize impacts on our communities. So we've deferred some projects to future years. We do expect to increase our investments in capital at a rate of approximately 3% a year, including 2021. Cash financing capital continues to increase. That 15% of our capital will be cash financed in 2021. And based on our plan, we should be up to 30% cash financing by 2025. Personnel, energy, supplies will continue to increase at a rate of about 1% a year. And that even with innovation and efficiencies, we expect critical operational needs. We think we can control increases to about 3% a year. So while I'm presenting a budget to you that's at a 5.2% increase in service charges for 2021, we can expect longer term that those increases will be in the 6 to 7% range. And there are a lot of question marks that we still have to think about, and that is, what are going to be the impacts of PFAS? Badger Mill Creek, what are the types of investments we're going to have to make to meet our compliance? Energy, what type of investments in energy? And of course, I&I, what type of investments are we going to need by I&I? It's also, I say that last bullet with innovation and efficiencies that we can, control increases to 3%. I think sometimes we take that for granted. And programs like Yahara Winds, going through the state's first adaptive management program and one of the country's first adaptive management programs, we saved our ratepayers $130 million by going to an adaptive management approach, which was new and risky for the district, but our new permit allows us to do that. And that would have been 15 to 20% rate increases if we would have just built a bigger treatment plant. That would have, if we would not have had that chloride variance and been able to use pollution prevention techniques to reduce chloride, we would be talking about having to pay for infrastructure improvements in the $500 million to $1 billion, which would have increased service charges 15 to 20. Well, it would have tripled our service charges if we would have had to comply by our normal approaches. So it's just really important to realize that the district has a history of reaching out and trying innovative approaches. And with the future and PFAS and others, we are going to have to rely on our team of really innovative professionals here at the district to find those solutions, so we're not having to build microfiltration to remove PFAS and other things. So what's next for you is that we have our budget public hearing in September. We will have a commission final direction and well, also on September 24th, if there are the things you'd like us to consider in our budget, September 24th is a great time to do that. On October 25th, we'll receive final direction. And then you will adopt the capital operating budget and debt service budgets with new rates in October 29th. The final thing, what I'll leave you with is one of the difficulties we're having is, as you know, expenditures are only one piece of the puzzle when we put a rate together. The other piece is what we can expect in revenues for the coming year. And with so much uncertainty and seeing our flows and loadings being reduced significantly this year because of the coronavirus pandemic, we had to really think through how long will we be experience lower flows in 2021? And we don't have the answers to that question. So what we've done in this budget is we expect our flows to remain fairly low. And what that means in terms of the math for our customer communities is that the actual rate will look higher than 5.2%, but the flows and loadings will be lower. So what communities are actually paying won't be that much more than 5.2% on average, but the rate itself will look higher just because of the math. The flows will be different. If things recover, and don't we all hope that our economy recovers and we get back to normal sooner rather than later? And after first quarter sewer billing and monitoring, if we see a dramatic recovery in flows and loadings, there is a possibility that we may return to the commission to adjust around completely possible. And just wanted you to know, and I'll be sharing the same information with the customer communities, that we'll be monitoring those revenues or those flows and loadings very, very closely, and we will make adjustments if we need to. So with that, that is my presentation. And if there are any burning questions now, be happy to take those.
Michael, this is
Okay.
Amanda. I just wanted to point out on that last slide, it's actually October 15th and not October 25th.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking something was wrong there. Okay, does
Thank
anybody
you.
have any questions
Thank
for
you.
Michael that you need to ask right now? Or otherwise, we can discuss it more at the last meeting in September. Okay, I don't see any hands being raised. Okay, so I think everybody seems fairly, I don't want to say happy, but fairly content at this point in time regarding your presentation, Michael. So I guess, there probably would be more discussion at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. So that will take us to, excuse me, item 5, accept the report on the 2019 360-degree review of the Chief Engineer and Director, something we discussed over the past couple meetings, particularly at the last meeting in closed session. So is Sarah, are you going to want to lead this off?
You're muted, Sarah.
Thank you. So thanks, everybody. I just wanted to give a brief overview. For acceptance today by the commission, we have a summary of the Chief Engineer and Director's 360 review from 2019. So that's what you see in your packet with the resolution. Just to give, it gives a brief overview of the process. I'll just verbally go through. We did collect feedback from our customer community members this year, so thank you to everybody who participated. We also collected feedback from all direct reports to the Chief Engineer and Director, as well as the Employee Leadership Council. So thanks to everybody who provided us feedback, and special thanks to Michael, as always, for working through this extensive performance review process with us annually. It's such a good opportunity for us as commissioners and for the staff team to collaborate and learn more about the exciting work that's happening at MMSD. So this summary is simply to put that record of that performance review into our minutes and accept them. Happy to answer any questions about the process, but otherwise today we're just asking the commission to accept this report so we can close out the process from the 2019 Chief Engineer and Director's performance review.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Does anybody have any questions? I think we've discussed this in pretty good level over the past. Okay, I don't see anybody with a hand raised. So then we need a motion to accept to approve the resolution accepting the 2019 report of this 360-degree review.
It's Wilson. I'll make that motion. Happy to.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Wilson. Do we have a second?
Second, Commissioner Clark.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Clark to accept the 2019 report of the 360-degree review of the Chief Engineer and Director. Do we have any questions or comments, discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the resolution, say aye.
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 And any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. I gotta get back to my agenda here. Just bear with me. Okay, that will take us to item 6, the study session on defining district owners. Michael, you're gonna lead this off again?
I am, and I just wanted to check in with the commission. Can you see my screen? It says owners and stakeholders, okay? Commissioner Hovell, can you see that?
Yes, I can, Michael.
Okay, well, I'm coming to you. This is a study session, and this study session is coming to you because the commission members, some of the newer commission members wanted to evaluate and look at who are our owners, who do we represent, and have that discussion. So that's why we're having a study session today. I have to say I love this picture because it really represents the conversation we're having today. This picture has owners, stakeholders, legal owners, moral owners, just about everyone who has a stake in the success of the district or different groups, many of which are represented right here. You have members of the EPA in this photograph, the DNR, you have Mayor Soglin from the city of Madison, the Dane County Executive, you have President Hovell representing the district, you have Commissioner Wilson representing a town of Westport, and then you have staff in here as well, off to the left. And of course, Jeff Endress, Yahara Pride Farm Group, representing just a key stakeholder that we work with. And so that's why this is such an important discussion. So when you're leading something, even like Yahara Winds, there are a lot of people that care about what's happening. And so our agenda is, I'll try to provide a little background. We'll have some discussion and direction. And Bill Walker and I, we were tag teaming on this together, and we co-authored the commission agenda report. And so I'm just, so Bill will be jumping in and filling in details that I've missed in this process of looking at it. So the background is really, how did we get here? And who are our owners and who are stakeholders? This conversation really became in our thinking in 2015 when our governance changed. And at the time in 2015, some of our customer communities were asking the question of, well, who appoints a commission? And at the time we had 5 commissioners that are appointed by the county executive. And Mayor Soglin, he said to me, this is taxation without representation, that as communities who are paying for the district, we do not have a say in what the district does. And so state law was changed. The city of Madison, along with many of our surrounding communities, banded together to change our governance to now what we have is a 9-member commission. And the 9 commissioners, as you know, you're appointed by our communities that are members of the district. In 2018, the commission established a policy book, put together a policy book, and in study session had very robust discussions about who do we serve, who owns the district, who are our customers, and established customer communities and ratepayers as owners, and recognizing that the communities themselves are the ones that pay the bills that we bill, and that the district is accountable to through state statutes, but also ratepayers who at the end of the day are the ones that have to pay the bills. And we can never lose sight of the fact that households, the impact on households with everything we do. And we have learned a lot since this time, and enacting this communities and ratepayers approach. And we've had some, at least at the staff level, this has worked, and in some ways it has brought some confusion to us in some ways. And we don't have to get into a lot of detail, but a really good example in community meetings in our head a little bit and say, so who are we really inviting to the table in district priority setting? Is it the communities that represent the district? Is it the broader community? And those commissioners who attended some of those early meetings said we put out a wide net. And so we had some NGOs show up and other interest groups show up at those meetings and provide really valuable input. But those individuals also were engaged in priority setting with the owners or those who are paying the bills. And so it created a bit of a conflict for us at the staff level of saying, well, are we getting confused here between who our legal owners are and who maybe our moral owners are, or who our stakeholders are? And do we need to be rethinking some of this? So that's one practical example of that. Owners, through policy governance and how we're structured, if you think of who are owners, they're people who care for the district beyond their personal use of it. And they care for the district as a whole. They want the district to be effective, safe, and productive. And they also care about future owners, that their needs are met as well. And then the last bullet is owners have the ability to intervene if they don't like how things are going. And they have the legal ability to do that. Stakeholders, on the other hand, are those that are affected by the actions of the district. And stakeholders can be employees, they can be NGOs, they can be businesses, they can be developers, they can be plants and animals, they can be the environment, they can be people who care about the health impacts of PFAS. So you could see there's just a wide range of stakeholders that the district cares about and works on, of impacts on projects. But a distinguishing feature of a stakeholder from an owner is that that they do not have authority over the organization. They have influence over decision makers and can show up at commission meetings or show up to their communities. They do not have authority over the district. And so that is really the distinguishing feature between what an owner is and a stakeholder. And so, Bill, maybe I could just jump in here and pause and see if there's any other details here that you'd like to add to this discussion before I get into the staff recommendation, and then open it up for the commission discussion.
Let's first check if people can hear me.
We can hear you fine, Bill.
There's one thing I would like to add, and this is a little bit of an inside baseball point. I attended a webinar on utility decision-making a couple of weeks ago, and the presenter made a comment that stuck with me. We were talking about how a lot of the issues they face are business issues first and engineering issues second. And by business issue, they meant it's an issue that affects stakeholders in different ways, and it's therefore a more complicated and more difficult decision. And you have to resolve which particular interest, owner, stakeholder, et cetera, you're going to serve before you can move on to how you're going to serve it, which is the engineering decision. And my department is restructuring to be more strategic in this way with the way we do investment and strategic initiatives. And for us to succeed in that, we really need a policy structure that ties the ultimate important outcomes, the interest of our owners, to the decision making that we have to do. And so part of why I'm interested in this discussion is the more clarity the commission can make about who exactly we are working for, the easier it will be for staff at all levels to make the kind of sort of hard business so-called decisions when we're planning projects or choosing initiatives. So there's this sort of a selfish interest here on my part. This is not just an academic exercise. It has real impact on how decisions get made by staff.
Thanks, Bill. So we have something to flop on the table for you, a recommendation. And usually in study sessions, we don't put recommendations forward, but I would say that we feel this is a pretty solid recommendation. Let me see if I can move to the next slide here. I feel like I might be stuck. It's not going to let me make a recommendation. How about that? Here we go. Is that we'd like you to consider that that owner communities be established as the owners of the district, and these would be the legal owners that are established by state statutes that are part of our service area. We've shed the word customer in our recommendation because what's implicit in the word customer is that a customer has a choice. That if they don't like what you're selling, they can go someplace else. Our communities do not have a choice. The only thing they are able to do is control what the district does. And so our recommendation is to remove the word customer and use the word owner communities, which I think gives us a real nice clarity of who we're talking about when we're developing policy. And then work on identifying what those key stakeholders are in decision making. And that is what so much of our discussion was when we went through policy governance in 2018, was around who do we need to have in front of our top of mind and who should we be considering all the time as we meet the needs of our owners. So that is the staff recommendation we're putting on the table for you to consider, and maybe to stoke some conversation and commission discussion. two things to think about is whose opinions matter most when you are considering a district policy decision. That might help in this conversation, and really for staff to get a sense from you which specific stakeholders should the commission and district focus most on. So with that, President Hovell, I'm going to turn it back over to you and the commission for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Michael and Bill, for your presentation. So do we have anybody that, Ezra, you want to make a comment? I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Michael and Bill. You have a list of our customer communities as you're defining it? Might be the easiest way to ask my question. I think about the fact that there are different kinds of communities we serve, from quasi-governmental units like sanitary districts to towns to villages to cities. And then there are some different kind of categories or classes or cohorts of folks who have joined as customer communities over the many years. And I just wonder if there's any need for distinction between any of those different folks. And I guess I'm actually wondering to what universe of the kind of folks we generally refer to casually as customer communities you actually mean when you make this proposal.
That's a good clarifying question. It would be all of the above that you just mentioned that receive a bill from the district every quarter for and pay service charges. So that list of 32 entities that sewer utility districts, cities, towns, and villages would all be considered owners of the district according to this proposal.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, Mary, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm interested in the relationship between who do we consider when making decisions, and having that be the owner community primarily, our primary interest. So there's that, but the relationship between that, like where this discussion is going, and the mission of the district, which is to protect public health and the environment. Would the mission inform then who the important stakeholders are? Or I'm just interested in that relationship between the mission and this discussion.
I wonder if I could chime in on that, Michael.
Go ahead.
The challenge with stakeholders, as I see it, is they don't agree with one another. So it's very easy to say our mission is to protect the environment, but there we could probably find 20 different stakeholder groups that will disagree over any particular district action when it gets down to brass tacks. And this is why I've made my point about this affects what we do as staff inside the district. Here we are looking at whatever it may be, some energy option or a biosolids handling option, and there are 15 different stakeholders, and they're not all going to have the same opinion. And it's one thing to say we're going to consider them, but at the end of the day, we're going to, in general, not always, there are often a lot of consensus options available, but in general, we're going to have to pick a winner or a loser. And as I see it, you're not really interested in having staff do that. That's a commission policy discussion. And the great power of the policy governance model, in my opinion, is it creates a nice structure for doing that. And the owner concept is kind of the key word there. It lets you say, no, really, at the end of the day, what are we here for? And our staff proposal is, you're here for those local governments that pay our bills. That does not mean we don't consider other interests. It means that when it comes down to the very end and we cannot find a win-win, what do?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Brad, I see your hand, and then Sarah.
Yes. Is it true that all of the sewer utility districts have been created by cities, towns, and villages? I'm thinking that that's correct. And if it is, then I would think that the legal owners are as defined by the statute and limited to cities, towns, and villages that make up the district service area. And if that's correct, then I think that the staff recommendation is indeed a very solid one. And I'm very comfortable with proceeding along the lines outlined in the staff recommendation.
Sarah, did you have any comments?
Well, I was going to echo in many ways what Brad just said, but I think there was a bit of a question in there, which is it true that the customer community, basically the owners are by statute, are rate paying communities? Is that correct?
My silence, I don't know the answer to that question, but that would be a follow-up at a future meeting. We can research that. I don't know the exact answer to that.
Okay. Yeah, because I would. Oh, thanks, Paul. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that under our enabling statute, chapter 200, it's only municipalities that can create the district, and then are the entities that under the recent statutory change appoint the commissioners. The municipalities are defined as cities, villages, towns, or counties.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. As I said, I was going to echo in many ways what Brad said, but add the nuance perhaps that for me, the staff recommendation resonates because the accountability mechanism for the ultimate decision makers on these policy governance topics, being us as commission members, lies in our appointed, the entities that appoint us to the commission. So even, stakeholders who may want to have a say, their ultimate accountability on whether or not we are reappointed to make the decisions that we make would be going through our appointing bodies. So I appreciate the distinction here between owners and stakeholders, particularly when following that trail of accountability for us as the ultimate decision makers in a policy governance model.
Okay, I do agree with Brad and Sarah's comments. I think that stakeholders will vary based on the issue that may be at hand. And I also think the ratepayers are basically probably one of the major stakeholders, and it's really them, the ratepayers, who give context to the communities that we serve, and then the communities to us. So anybody else have any comments? I think, Michael, you're kind of hearing her on your page with that clarification, in that I think I like what Sarah had said, that do we do it by those who are of the appointing bodies to of us commissioners?
Right. It would be a refinement, a good one.
Yeah, I think when you get down to it, that whose opinion matters most, I guess it really gets down to that those are the communities that we directly serve, which are the ones that appoint us. So, okay, anybody else have any comments? Ezra, I see your hand still up. I don't know if you had anything else to add.
Yeah, sorry I didn't lower it, but I am raising it again. Thank you for noticing. This comes back to one of those questions I was posing, and I think I'm in agreement with, I think, the logic of what Sarah and Brad have said, and Tom has sounded like he agrees with, is that we might refine to limit the universe of folks we consider owner communities to be the cities and towns and villages, and not to include those sanitary districts, which are sort of creatures of those other local units of government. Paul, you'll correct me if I get any of the legalities wrong because I'm not a lawyer, or Tom, but I think that refinement makes a lot of sense. And I also think about a future possibility of an Oregon or other communities that might join, but I mean, I guess we don't know how they might join, but if they ever were to join, would they join statutorily and get an opportunity to appoint someone to the commission, or would they simply join in the sense of feeding, influence to us and are charging them? And that might kind of be a different category there. And I think we should be careful to craft this where those different categories can be allowed for in the future. And perhaps those folks are different. My brain goes to the model of water utilities that have retail customers and wholesale customers, and there's a difference there, and maybe it wouldn't quite be the same structure to ours, but my mind thinks about it in that way, where there are folks who we serve. In fact, we serve the honey wagons, right, who come to the top of the plant there, but there's a difference. They're not customer communities or customers or owners in the same way. So I appreciate the nuance. It's helping me because I think that we need to be really careful and nuanced about this. So thanks. I like the direction we're heading with today's conversation.
Now, we had a similar situation when the city of Verona was, they downsized their treatment plant and we absorbed them into our service area. They became, an owner and or a customer community, so to speak. And so those types of decisions we'll have to make with like Oregon and in the future as well, as to what extent are we wholesale provider and they continue to run a utility, or do we take on full treatment responsibilities?
I'm trying to think back to Verona, and I think I don't remember anything other than the fact that we basically annexed them to the district. But that'd probably be an easy thing to check, is to see what legal things. I might be wrong. The annexation sticks out, but there may have been some other type of thing that we did, given that it was a whole community. Because I think right now we still add, parts of Verona as needed when they annex territory or do additional service area. Okay, anybody else have any comments? I don't. Go up here. I don't see any hands. Oh, Grant.
Commissioner Foster.
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree with everything that's been said, and I think clarifying around owner versus customer is an important clarification. I think it might actually open us up to talk about customers then as a sort of a new group, which could include owners, but as Ezra said, we've got other customers involved. I'm also just thinking about farmers that we work with, or I think there are people that even have a financial relationship with us that aren't, I think, part of that owner community. The thing I wanted to just raise though also is, there is this sort of the appointing authority for commissioners, which I think makes sense as the primary definition around our owners, but also, as a legal entity, I think we also have a really significant relationship with basically anyone who owns property or resides inside of our district boundary. So, we I think have statutory authority, even to collect tax, right, which we're not exercising right now. But I think, so I think that the actual district boundary and where we have defined legal authority for taxation or special assessments is probably significant also, and may not be 100% match with the municipalities that have appointing authority. So I just think that I'm just kind of thinking on the fly, but I think that it's important to recognize our relationship with all of the people kind of over which we have authority, and then I would say accountability, even if it's not, either a direct representation, they're not voting for the commissioners, or even indirect, where people that can vote for local units of government that then can appoint commissioners. So that's a little bit cloudy, but I just wanted to call it out because I think it'll be important for us to really think about, you know, property owners within the actual geographic area of the district as it's defined at any moment in time.
Okay, thank you, Grant. I think that's one of the reasons we added ratepayers. Brad and Sarah, Ezra, another Tom, you know, we had that very detailed discussion during the policy governance, and this is probably the issue in which we spent the most time. So yeah, that's an interesting point, and that I think is why we added ratepayers. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add regarding that.
I guess just to clarify again, I think there's ratepayer, what I think assumes a certain service, but I think we have, and maybe Paul can chime in, but I think we have as a corporate entity, we have the legal authority to charge special assessments or enact a property tax that may include property, you know, that's basically within our district boundaries that may not even be a current ratepayer, that is not, you know, otherwise paying for any direct service. So I think there may be just a little bit of a distinction between those who are actually sending a bill to and are paying an ongoing fee for service versus property owners within our district boundaries where we have an authority to assess charges or tax their property.
I think that's true. Commissioner Foster raises a correct point that we could do that, or we have the authority to do that. To the best of my knowledge, we have not exercised that authority, so that while the statutory authority does extend to that limit, we've effectively been operating, to use Commissioner Meyer's phrase, more as a wholesaler. So we provide wholesale services to our various communities. The communities then administer, you know, they maintain their system and do the billing and the collecting and all of that type of thing. And I think that as long as we're under that kind of wholesale arrangement, the kind of staff recommendation that Michael set out makes sense. I think if we were to go to a property tax or special assessment basis, which we could do, I think at that point, it may make sense to revisit how we look at ratepayers in terms of having a more direct impact. But anyway, those are just my off the cuff thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Sarah, you had a comment?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the point that Commissioner Foster brought up. And I think the clarifying piece for me goes back to that line of accountability. So I think in some ways we need to be direct, that we are basically we're not transferring, we're putting an expectation on our owners that they also understand that their lines of accountability lies with their voters, right? The residents in their districts who are actually paying the charges that they're passing through to them. Whereas our relationship is with the people who are quote unquote voting, right? But appointing us and have authority to remove us as commissioners. So that's why I think the distinction of stakeholder for residents in the area, at least as you were saying, Paul, with our current, the fact that we aren't, you know, leveraging a tax at this point makes sense, because in some ways we should be realistic about where that accountability lies. And not to say we don't have a moral responsibility. I appreciated that discussion in the car, but to take the opinions and gather feedback from stakeholders, but ultimately it goes back to where our accountability sits. But appreciate the discussion. As Ezra said, it's good to come back to this and dig in a little bit deeper. But I think I agree with staff recommendations still.
Tom, you had a comment?
Yeah, if we were on go to meeting after Sarah's comment she just made, I would have put a thumbs up on my screen, but I can't do that here. So I'm saying thumbs up, Sarah, because I agree with what she just said. I think the discussion is great, and it's nice to have it to look at all the nuances, but it really comes down to who influences us, and that's who appoints us, I think. And I think you guys are on the right track and appreciate what you've done here. So that's all I had. Just wanted to chime in because an attorney can't go by without saying something.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. So Michael, I think you kind of got the gist. Thank you, Grant, for your point. I think Paul's probably right that if we ever were to do the property tax, that we would then have to reconsider the, or who was ever on the commission at that point would have to reconsider the ownership priority. So anybody else have anything they want to add? Okay, seeing none, I think that concludes this item. Michael, any other information you would like from the commission?
I just want to thank the commission for this discussion, and our next step is to take this direction back and look through the commission policy book and make necessary edits to it, and maybe look at, do we need to be a little bit more explicit about what was just discussed today. And so we'll bring that back to you for review and approval at a future meeting.
Did I hear somebody in the background? Okay, that takes us to item 7, the Chief Engineer and Director's Report. Michael, you have your CED update?
I'm going to, I don't have any things to report aside from what Paul's going to be talking about with PFAS and other things that are top of mind right now. So I'll just defer to Attorney Kent.
Okay, Paul, well, you might as well lead off then.
Sure. Let me pull up the screen that I have. You know, we continue to track the various items that are for DNR, but probably the most significant is the PFAS rule. And just by way of a little bit of background, there's actually 3 rules that the department is looking at: one to deal with groundwater, one drinking water, and the other surface water. Each of those have separate stakeholder groups and so forth that are moving forward. And the surface water group is the one that most directly affects us. And that group met on August 27th. And basically it was a presentation of kind of where the department is, and then it provided the opportunity for stakeholders to make short presentations. And, you know, I think the thing that is important to note for the district, and this isn't, you know, it's something at this point we're tracking, but the current proposed standard of 2 parts per trillion for PFOS and 35 to 45 for PFOA, if those proceed as numeric standards, chances are, because 2 parts per trillion is basically the limit of detection and background, it is likely, and we'll find out a little bit more after our study is done, but in all likelihood, our effluent is going to test above that. And that means that if that standard goes into effect, we would have either the option of treatment or applying for variance. And if we're looking at treatment, we're looking at probably reverse osmosis, which is the same treatment technology that Michael mentioned earlier in the capital budget that we looked at for chlorides a few years ago. And the numbers that Michael gave of, you know, several $100 million to $2 billion, considering capital and operating costs, that was for only treating part of the district's discharge. if our standard is at 2 parts per trillion for PFOS, we would probably have to treat all of it. So those costs would actually be even higher than that. So that effectively puts us into the realm of a variance. And as we found out in our last permit round, EPA denied us a variance, even at those extremely high costs for chloride, based on economic impact. So the chloride variance that we have right now is for essentially doing our pollution minimization plan. We're taking advantage of a variance that says it's a better environmental benefit to do that rather than treat. That's probably not an option here. So the question is whether we would even be entitled to a variance. And so it just creates a number of issues. There were several views presented at the stakeholder meeting that suggested that if, in fact, the real solution here, like with chlorides and with mercury and the other things that the district has been so successful in doing, is pollution minimization and source reduction, that developing standards that directly foster that approach would seem to make more sense than establishing a numeric standard that is going to create a number of significant issues for the district and others. So that's something that, you know, we will continue to watch. And I think as the process moves forward, you know, will be something that the district may want to weigh in on. Right now, I just want to emphasize it's very early in the process. There was just some preliminary stakeholder involvement. The next step is that there will be an economic impact assessment as a standard part of the rulemaking process. And then following that economic assessment, the rule would go forward for public hearings, ultimately board approval, legislative approval, and approval essentially by the governor. So there's lots of steps. It's about a 3-year process, but the consequences are potentially significant. And so it's one that we're following very closely.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I was looking at your memo again, so I got to get back to the top here. Okay, that takes us future meeting schedule. That's in the packet. So our next meeting is in a few weeks on what was it, September 25th, if I remember right. And then any future agenda topics? Any other business? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you have a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Wilson.
So motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by
Commissioner Clark.
Commissioner Clark to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Good meeting,
Opposed?
folks.
Thank you. Opposed?
Thank you.
None carries. Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
good,
everybody. Nice
Thanks,
job.
everyone.
Stay
Take
safe.
care.
enjoy the beautiful weather.
Yeah. All right.